Welcome to the MLB Slate Breakdown. I'm Jason Gilbo. With me is Brent Hyde, taking a look at tonight's 15-game MLB slate. First 15-game slate of the year. It's also 420, so happy 420 to all you people out there as well.
Yeah, I knew we were gonna have to get one of those 420 jokes out of the way quick and early.
I'm just wishing people a happy day.
I'm at that age where I'm like, man, these 420 people are annoying.
Oh man, come on, Brent.
Hey, I was one of those people, posting all the 420 stuff whenever I was a kid, but now I'm at that age where I'm like, get off my lawn.
Oh man, you're growing up. You got a world map in the back. You got books, mahogany. It's just very grown up.
Yep.
15 games, a lot of good pitching options, a lot of fun GPP ways to go here tonight. You got cores. There is some weather at cores that'll probably be more relied on to kind of take a look before the slate starts, like 4 or 5 in the afternoon, because Colorado weather is insane, and those games usually do play.
Yeah, they usually do. To like they'll just delay and delay and delay until they can get that game in. Luckily, for at least for me, I don't really care because I don't really have interest in Coors tonight, so it doesn't really bother me.
No, I'm in the same boat. Let's dive into this first game here, Cleveland and Baltimore. Trevor Bauer taking on Dylan Bundy. I have some interest in Bauer here tonight, obviously against this Baltimore team that strikes out a ton. There's some risk. Obviously, he is giving up a decent amount of hard contact rate, which is a concern. Obviously, Baltimore still has some pop, even though they haven't showed it. But Bauer's definitely interesting in tourneys.
I feel like he's a little bit underpriced for the upside that he has in the spot. We're talking about an Orioles team that's striking out 28.5% of the time to right-handed pitching this season. Bauer's a guy dating back to last year, 26% strikeout rates. The hard contact allowed to righties is a little concerning. It's about 36.4%. But he's done a decent job of limiting fly balls, a pretty low 305 WOBA allowed. I like him in this spot against the Orioles. I think he's probably my top tournament arm that's not named like Kershaw and all these other like big name guys. And like I said, I think he has plenty of upside and is probably too cheap.
Yeah, I think so too. And like the only guy that I maybe consider off of him is Manny Machado, and that's strictly BVP. He's owned Bauer, and the average exit velocity over 100 off Bauer in like 9 barrel attempts is insane, or batted ball attempts is insane.
Yeah, that's like he's like my biggest concern, and there's always the risk that he's gonna do what he did yesterday and break the slate and hit 2 home runs. So that is a little bit concerning. But if Bauer can get around him, like he's gonna have to deal with like Adam Jones and a bunch of these guys that are just striking out a lot.
Yeah, so Cleveland side, I don't have interest in Bundy. Maybe on a different slate I would. I don't really have interest in Cleveland bats, but I mean, I guess you can just looking at this ballpark. You do look at Bundy, his strikeout rate does drop a little bit dating back to last year against lefties. Still a fly ball guy, so I mean, actually, Cleveland might be a kind of a sneaky way to go tonight.
I think you can look at it two ways. Like the Indians' offense has started to get things going recently, but they are still a team that is striking out a decent amount. They're 23.5%. The lefties are a little bit concerning, but like I think there's a path to Bundy at least having a decent game. The biggest issue is like he just hasn't been able to notch a win yet. Um, I don't mind him again as a tournament arm. Like I think he's a high upside, a high strikeout potential guy in the spot, but I think I'm more interested in some of the Cleveland lefties here. That starts with Francisco Lindor. I mean, I guess he's a switch hitter, so you can call it what you want. But he's great against right-handed pitching, 233 ISO, 337 WOBA against them. But he's really good against sliders. 315 ISO and a 357 xWOBA against sliders last season. He would be an interesting one-off option in this spot.
Yeah, I agree. I think Brantley was the other guy there who's a cheaper option. When you got to look at Bundy, it is the slider that you kind of got to take a look at. And his whiff rate under 10%. Same with Jose Ramirez, which is always positive against sliders. But Brantley, 355 WOBA, 177 ISO. Limited sample size just because he has been hurt. But 37 for a cleanup hitter in Baltimore on DK is not bad.
Yeah, and you're talking about a guy that's been pretty hot since coming back. He had what in the Detroit series and the start of the Twins series, and Puerto Rico had three really good outings. 365 xWOBA, 223 ISO against sliders, a 463 xWOBA, 227 ISO against four seamers. That kind of in Bundy's velocity range. So I like him in the spot. You mentioned Ramirez, not as great against sliders, but he is decent against the four seam fastball. So I do like him. If you wanted to do like a mini stack of like Brantley, Ramirez, and Lindor, you could definitely differentiate yourself in tournaments.
Yep, agree. Anyone else there?
Nah.
Pittsburgh and Philly next here. You got Ivan Nova versus Ben Lively. Kind of mediocre run totals here. Decent ballpark. This is weird. I don't really have a ton of interest in this game on both sides, but I think there could be some potential one-offs.
I think there's potential for Ivan Nova to actually put up a decent outing here. Obviously, we know the Phillies, they did kind of shell Tyon and Glasnow yesterday, but Nova's kind of a different pitcher. He does rely a little bit more on ground balls. We have seen him go deeper into games. He's pitched into the seventh inning in each of his last two starts. He's given up 3 runs in both of those, but I think he's a guy against a Phillies team that does strike out a decent amount. They're 27% on the season against right-handed pitching. I think he's a guy that you can at least look at as a value option here. If he can generate enough strikeouts and ground balls and limit some of those runs, I think he could be in line for a decent outing, and he could get the win because I think the lefties are going to get to Ben Lively in this spot.
I could see that. For me, it just kind of depends on what Philly's lineup comes out. Just because that strikeout rate drops dramatically with the Nova. I mean, 11% against lefties going back to last year. 34% for contact. I think that's just only my concern. But if we get like Gabe Kapler rolling out some weird right-handed heavy lineup like he's done a couple times this year, I think Nova would be more in play.
Yeah, he's more just a value SP2 option for me. He's not someone that I'm looking at like on FanDuel or something like that.
Yeah. I'll still look at Rhys Hoskins here for the Phillies. Always going to be in play, especially in tournaments, just with that huge upside. Cesar Hernandez, I mean, continues to be an excellent cash game play leading off.
Yeah, he's one of the guys that I kind of highlighted. It was Nick Williams, Carlos Santana, Rhys Hoskins, Caesar. Any of these guys are in play if you want to stack the Phillies. Like if you're a glutton for punishment, you're probably stacking the Phillies and hoping they go off like they did last night. I don't know that I will personally be doing that. It would mostly be like Reese Lightning, and that would probably be it.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Pittsburgh side of things with the lefties. I mean, Lively 387 WOBA dating back to last year to left-handers. You got actually a handful of options in this lineup that you can go with. Are you stacking here again?
Yes, I will go back to stacking. I know they let me down yesterday against Arrieta, who had like a career strikeout outing against them. I don't see that happening again. I definitely want to attack Lively with some of these lefties. Adam Frazier, a guy, 12% strikeout rate to right-handed pitching dating back to last season, 340 WOBA. Excellent option at the very top of that order. Value option that you can consider to, get some exposure to some of the higher priced pitchers and some of the higher priced bats. I do love Colin Moran in the spot too. 157 ISO, 358 WOBA, 368 on base percentage against right-handers dating back to last season. And then Josh Bell would be like an excellent one-off option here. He's excellent against the curveball, which is something that Lively, it's why Lively has struggled against lefties, because his curveball is just getting obliterated. But 462 ISO, 527 WOBA against curveballs for Josh Bell last season.
Yeah, looking at some of the average distance rates off his pitches is insane. Like in his whiff rates, oh my god! Like Lively 6% whiff rate on his curveball.
Yeah, and
that's bad.
I misspoke. His curveball to lefties. Sorry, Lively is allowing a 462 ISO and 527 WOBA against. Josh Bell has posted a 348 ISO against curveballs. So misspoke a little bit there.
And they get a park upgrade as well in that ballpark for home runs.
Yes.
So let's move on. Next one here, we got Toronto and New York. Sonny Gray, Sonny Gray, Sonny Gray.
The fraud. The fraud takes the mound again.
And then you got Marco Estrada on the other side. I anticipate obviously the Yankees being popular here tonight. You're going to have to pay, a pretty penny to get these guys, but in a good spot here. This is another spot where, I'm going to be looking all the way down, and you even got some value guys. You have like, Neil Walker, Aaron Hicks in that bottom half of the lineup if you don't completely want to pay up. And Gardner leading off continues to be a cheap guy in these spots that I just really like to plug in.
Yeah, I prefer the righties in this spot because Estrada is extremely good against lefties. 22% strikeout rate, 291 WOBA allowed dating back to last season. The problem with that is he's still giving up an almost 50% fly ball rate, and you're in a stadium with the wind blowing out. They have that short porch out there that could spell disaster for Estrada. You mentioned the Yankees are going to be popular. I completely agree. I think they're going to be more popular than Coors tonight. Obviously, Aaron Judge, a guy striking out like 30% of the time against right-handed pitching, but also has like an insane ISO, 345 ISO, just massive upside in the spot for Judge, Stanton. Any of these righties are in play. The one guy to keep an eye on, and I think he might be like the best value option across the board tonight, is going to be Miguel Andujar, who has been on fire recently. He now has 3 straight double-digit fantasy point games. He has a home run in his last outing. 32 plate appearances, only a 12% strikeout rate, 333 ISO against right-handed pitching. He's a guy who's putting the ball in the air like 41% of the time. Decent average exit velocity for him. I love Andujar as like a value option tonight.
Yeah, that's a good call there. Not a lot of people are going to be digging that deep on that Yankees back half. Looking into like Estrada here, obviously throwing that change up quite a bit, about 30% of the time. Both Gregorius, all these guys look to really crush changes, but like Gary Sanchez and Gregorius, both huge numbers against changeups.
Yeah, I like Gregorius in the spot again. I prefer the righties, but you can't go wrong with some Didi, who's still been mashing the ball recently. And then Sanchez strikeout rate is starting to fall. He's down to like 22% dating back to last season, which is good to see. So as long as he continues to have some of these plate discipline numbers, he's a guy with just a massive ceiling because he has so much power.
Yeah. Toronto side, I don't like Gray, but I don't necessarily like Toronto bats here. Like on a 15-game slate, I think I'm going to be still heading elsewhere. Although I will say, if you want to look at like a Justin Smoke in this ballpark, I won't hate him as a one-off for really contrarian ownership.
I like a couple of these guys, and the biggest concern I have with Gray is like when I was digging into my research for today's slate, I read the following sentence. Gray has been working on mechanical adjustments following his most recent start. When you have a pitcher 3 starts into the season working on mechanical adjustments, that is not good. Like this, you shouldn't be working on mechanical adjustments in the season, like 3 starts in. Like that is very concerning, and like there are some bats that could punish him. You mentioned Justin Smoke, 267 ISO, 360 WOBA against right-handed pitchers. Granderson, another guy with a ton of power, 253 ISO. Solarte, decent amount of power, low strikeout rate. And then you have Teoscar Hernandez, who continues is off to like a torrid start to the season. Like I know he's not going to keep it up. You don't have to tell me that his 405 ISO, 455 WOBA, and 405 BABIP are going to regress. Like, duh. It's not going to continue. Like I get that, but like he is still dirt cheap, and he is still hitting the cover off the ball, and you still have to consider him as a value option in this spot.
Yeah, Fantasy Lab should have an article on that coming out soon about Hernandez not keeping it up.
Yes, like I hate the fact that there's going to be people out there like, oh yeah, he's gonna regress. Like, duh.
No, I thought he'd stayed the best hitter in baseball right now.
Yeah, a guy that most people never heard of until he freaking started hitting homers for the Blue Jays is not going to be the best hitter in baseball.
Oh man, let's liven this thing up here a little bit down the line here. Let's get away from Sonny Gray.
Don't let me forget Aledmus Diaz down at the bottom of that order.
Kansas City next year. Daniel Norris taking on Jake Junis. These are the pitchers starting game 2.
Are we sure?
I think so. I'm like 80% sure.
Depending on where you look, these are the pitchers starting tonight's second game of the doubleheader.
We'll know officially in about 2 hours when we get that game one kicking off.
Well, they might still roll out someone different.
Oh god.
That's how this season has been so
I
far.
know. It's been awful. But let's take a look at these. Obviously, we're not going to probably. Well, we should get lineups for this game.
Oh yeah, there's like a 6 hour window between the first game and the second game. So unless this game goes like 26 innings, then we should get like that lineup out in time.
Yeah. I'm gonna get into a hot take here. I don't hate Daniel Norris as an SP2 on DK in like deep tournaments. To like stack him with Kershaw or Scherzer on the Slater Verlander and kind of still be able to get some bats. Norris has been a long relief guy this year. He hasn't been in the rotation, but previously in prior years he has been a rotation guy. Obviously, a former top prospect just really hasn't panned out. Has shown solid outings at times, but it is kind of rare. I'm just looking at this Royals lineup. Like they're striking out a ton against lefties, over 25% of the time so far this season. Last year they were a bottom 10 team against lefties. I know they do have a couple of bats that are hitting the ball hard against left-handers. I think these numbers will kind of start to average out a little bit, but I don't hate Norris. Like I think there is some upside here. And I think like 15, 18 DK points at that price will definitely do.
You mean to tell me that Alcides Escobar is not going to continue his torrid start against lefties? His 625 BABIP and 62.5% hard hit rating this season against him.
No, I don't think so.
I literally like my eyes about popped out of my head whenever I saw that his numbers against lefties this season. I don't mind the call. Like there's a lot of viable like dirt cheap SP2 options on the slate. Some more guys that we're going to talk about later. On the flip side, like I don't necessarily mind Jake Junis in the spot either against the Tigers team that not striking out a ton, but also not really doing a lot of damage. I think both pitchers are viable in tournaments as like value SP2 options.
I do too. I like the fact that Jake Junis is priced at like 8.3 because a lot of people are going to look and just go, "Oh, Jake Junis 8.3? No way."
Yeah. I wonder because like DraftKings still has Jason Hamill listed as probable for this game. I wonder if that's gonna like change, if that's gonna like mess people up that build their lineups early and just like don't come back to him.
Also, let me hold on real quick. Miguel Cabrera is in the starting lineup for the first game. I would not be surprised to see him sit out second.
Yeah, what catchers in the first game?
You got James McCann back there.
So
it would be I think Hicks would be in there tonight.
Good.
Yeah. So I mean, Miguel Cabrera at that age, like a guy who's been battling nagging injuries already, I just wouldn't be surprised unless they DH him.
Yeah, that's what they could end up doing. The batters in this, like especially like even though I do think Junis is in play, I think there's some Tigers bats that could be in play on the other side, and they're going to be extremely low owned. Heimer Candelario, grand slam yesterday, I think it was, has been actually hitting the ball a little bit better recently. He's a guy that profiles extremely well in this spot against sinker balls last season. 385 ISO. Junis is throwing that over 30% of the time to left-handed hitters. He's a guy I have a lot of interest in as like a one-off.
Yeah, I definitely don't mind that. I think Victor Martinez is kind of interesting as like a cheaper GPP play.
Yeah, I like him, and I just opened up Candelario's game log because it's updated for yesterday on DraftKings. His last 4 games, 29 fantasy points, 17 fantasy points, 13 fantasy points, 14 fantasy points.
Yeah, I mean, dude's got some pop.
And he's 3,300.
Yeah, so I mean, there's some decent value in here. Did you have any interest in like Royals bats?
I don't mind a couple of these guys. Like, even though it's like a lefty on lefty matchup for John Jay and Moustakas, I think both of those guys are in play in the spot. Solera, guys striking out a ton, but also hitting the ball extremely hard this season. I mentioned John Jay, Alcides Escobar. I know those numbers are going to regress, but until they do, I'm still going to continue to look at him. And then Whit Merrifield, a guy that hits sliders extremely well, 375 ISO against him last season. He would be like a one-off option that I think you can consider in the spot if you're not looking at the rest of the Royals.
Yeah, I think because they're so cheap, they could end up being like lineup fillers if you're not crazy enough to use Norris like me.
Yeah, exactly.
So, moving on here, Minnesota and Tampa. We talked about this game a little bit before recording, mostly about Chris Archer. Has not looked good. Some of his peripheral stuff is a little bit concerning. I mean, these are two boomer bust pitchers here in these spots. There's kind of no other way to phrase it, but I like the upside really on both sides.
There is a lot of upside for both of these pitchers depending on how lineups shake out. Right now, it's 7 lefties projected in the lineup for the Twins. I'm going to read off some numbers for Chris Archer against lefties this season. He is throwing his four-seam fastball 41% of the time, 526 xwOBA, 538 ISO on the pitch to lefties. His slider he's throwing 45% of the time, 421 ISO, 465 xwOBA. His changeup he's throwing 12% of the time, 324 xwOBA. That's against lefties, and you're telling me there's going to be 7 lefties potentially in that lineup. Chris Archer could be in trouble in this spot, even though it is a decent ballpark for pitchers.
Yeah, I've lost confidence in Archer, especially after the White Sox start. I think was my most concerning one. I was kind of willing to give him a pass on some of the others. And we saw what that Phillies team just did to him, who have kind of a similar lineup and similar outcome. I'm worried here. I get the price tag. I get there's upside. At first glance last night, looking at the slate, I had a ton of interest in Archer, and I think I've kind of talked myself down off of him, but still going to get some exposure here just because the upside for the price is still solid. But I think you definitely have to know your risk tonight with Archer because it could be a very horrible quick outing.
It could be, and he's definitely not someone that you can consider in cash games just because there is a lot of risk associated with him in the spot. And even if you're looking dating back to last season, he struggled with lefties, a 350 wOBA allowed, 43% hard contact. Fly ball rate was fine, but still 1.44 homers per 9 to lefties dating back to last season. So this isn't just a 1 year thing or this season thing. This is something that he struggled with last year too. So if you're going to be getting that many lefties in there, I'm definitely concerned about the potential for him to get shelled. But the Twins are striking out 24% of the time against righties, so there's potential for him to strike out a bunch of guys too.
Yeah. Before we get into the bats, let's talk Lance Lynn, who's basically kind of a similar problem here. It's lefties. I mean, dating back to last year, 354 wOBA allowed, 15.3% strikeout rate, 14.3% walk rate. We've seen Lynn walk a ton of batters so far this year, 10 through 2 starts. Tampa Bay is not they're a decent patient team. I kind of worry here if we get that lineup where it's 4 or 5 lefties, even though the lefties really aren't that great.
Yeah, I mean, the Rays this season, 22% strikeout rate to right-handed pitchers, but they can put, I think 5 total lefties in there against him. 1, 2, 3,
yeah.
4.
I don't know if Brad Miller's healthy, but if he is, he would be another one.
He's supposed to be activated for today's game. So you're going to get probably 4 lefties in there. There's potential for those 4 lefties to kind of do some damage to him. And then, of course, you have Crone, who's been hitting the ball extremely well. That could punish him if he, walks Span and Wendell or something like that. So there's a path if they don't load up a bunch of lefties against him to put up a good game like we saw against Houston. I think there were only 2 lefties in that lineup against Lynn, and he came out and he had an outstanding outing. But if they're going to load up lefties in the spot, I love stacking against him. If you get Span, Wendell, Malik Smith in that lineup, unfortunately on DraftKings you can't use Wendell and Miller together because they're both second base, but you can do it on FanDuel, assuming FanDuel actually has Brad Miller in the player pool.
It's like these guys miss one game and they immediately disappear from FanDuel forever.
But then they have guys like Boogie Cousins who misses an entire half of the season and isn't in the he's third
base eligible tonight.
Yeah. Miller is in there, so you can use him and Wendell because Miller is first base on FanDuel.
I mean, I like Wendell a lot here. He's had a nice couple of weeks stretch here. I think him and Malik Smith has some stolen base upside. Dude's really quick. Both these guys super cheap if you're kind of looking to fill out because, if you're using expensive pitching options, which you probably might be doing tonight, some of these guys are just dirt cheap that you can plug and play.
Yeah, for sure. Like I think he's extreme. Like Malik Smith is a guy that is extremely interesting in this spot, and I'm pulling up right now. I failed to look, but how Lynn is at holding runners. Let's see, stolen base success. Lynn's not terrible. I mean, runners have a 45% success rate against him, so like you could get potential for Malik Smith to swipe a couple bags too.
Yep. Twin side things, I think it's still kind of Rosario here for me that I'll take a look at just because he's cheap in GPPs. I don't have a ton of interest in the Twins here. I'd probably be more inclined to take lefties from the Rays side in this one.
I like Rosario in the spot. He's just way too cheap. And he's a guy that hits four seam fastballs and sliders extremely well. 289 ISO against the slider last season, 306 ISO against the four seamer. Also hits right-handed pitching extremely well. Like I love him in the spot. He's 3K on DraftKings. Like I said, just way too cheap. I don't mind using like Joe Mauer, who even though he doesn't have a lot of power anymore, still 463 xWOBA against four seamers last season. Still hitting the ball pretty darn well this season. You can look at Max Kepler. You can look at Logan Morrison, Jason Castro, a great cheap catcher option in the spot. Like you mentioned, revenge game for Logan Morrison. Like, unfortunately, dude has a .068 batting average so far this season. Like he's been really, really bad, but he is a guy in the past that has had a lot of power against right-handed pitching in a 274 ISO dating back to last season.
It's there. It just hasn't been there this year.
So that's pretty much all you can say. It's there. Like eventually it's going to come out, but
yeah, I don't hate it. I mean, I don't know. We saw the revenge games go wild last night for Brinson.
Yeah, Lewis Brinson.
Chase Anderson, what a dick. Let's move on here. Mets in Atlanta next. Sean Newcomb versus Noah Syndergaard. Syndergaard, another one of the aces you can definitely use here. I think he ranks fourth for me. I prefer Kershaw, Scherzer, Verlander, I think, over Syndergaard, but definitely in play.
Yeah, obviously I hate taking pitchers against the Braves, but this is also Noah Syndergaard, who has like a 32% strikeout rate dating back to last season, solid ground ball rate, limits hard contact to pretty much both sides of the plate. Not a lot to hate about him. I will say this: I am a little bit worried about Freddie Freeman because he has a 556 average with a homer and four ribbies and 9 at bats against Thor. So
do your diligence.
There you go. So yeah.
You mentioned Thor. I mean, 36% strikeout rate dating back to last year against lefties.
Yeah,
pretty crucial number against these Braves hitters here.
Yeah, because most of them are lefties.
Yeah. I don't like any of the Atlanta hitters on a 15-game slate trying to pick on Thor. I just think that's stupid.
Free money, Freeman, BVP play of the day.
I think I'll take my Machado BVP over Freeman.
There you go.
I like Thor here. I mean, I don't know how much exposure I'm going to have to him though tonight.
I doubt I'll have any exposure just because like I'm probably only playing one lineup and it's going to be Kershaw most likely, but like he's still a safe option in the spot. So like you can't go wrong with any of these top name pitchers today. It's just a matter of what kind of like game theory you want to approach because like Thor's going to be lower owned than Scherzer and Kershaw and probably Verlander.
Yep. We even have some interest on the other side with this one. Sean Newcomb going up against a Mets team that's been struggling against lefties so far to start the year. They do have a couple of guys that do have solid numbers against southpaws, but overall, I mean, Matt's 29% strikeout rate against lefties so far this year, ISO under 100, 29th in WRC plus, just was awful last night against Whistler. I kind of like Newcomb here. I mean, has some strikeout upside in this spot. If he can keep his walks under control and kind of limit the damage to like Cespedes and Flores, I think he has a solid outing here.
That's basically what I wrote. Whatever I put him in the cheat sheets today is like if he can reel in the walks against the Mets, he could have some success. Like they strike out a ton against lefties. Obviously, you have to worry about Wilmer Flores, notorious southpaw masher, and then you have guys like Asdrubal Cabrera, Todd Frazier, who are good against lefties, but like there's potential for him to strike out a bunch of guys, and he is extremely cheap. And like, this is a spot where I don't think people are going to really look to use Sean Newcomb. So in tournaments, I think he's a very, very good value option, and I think he's even viable in cash if we're being honest.
Yeah, I think as an SP2's, 7,400, I don't see him really blowing up tonight. I think he can find himself with a really decent floor. If I am taking Mets bats, which I don't find myself really looking to do tonight, I think Cespedes, though, 4-3 is cheap against the lefty on DK that I'll consider him. If you want to roll Wilmer Flores, I'm not going to hate it. Todd Frazier's also interesting, too, but I'm not super thrilled.
Yeah, my guys would basically be Flores, Asdrubal, and Frazier. Outside of those guys, like I don't have a lot of interest in these Mets bats.
No. Seattle, Texas next here. Mike Minor taking on Felix Hernandez. Things are going to get hot with this one. Hot take city. I'm ready.
I shockingly don't have a lot of interest in this game. Period. Like I know you're gonna get your hot take out of the way here pretty soon. Like I don't necessarily mind Felix as a GPP option, and I don't hate Mike Minor as a GPP option either. Like I don't see a ton of upside against a Mariners team that doesn't strike out a ton, but like this game's just not that appealing to me for some reason.
No, it's really not. Like on the Seattle side of things, like it really is Nelson Cruz, and that's kind of it. Against the lefty, he's too cheap on TK. I have some interest in Texas bats, which is probably like the second time all year I've said that. Usually, we're talking on the opposite side and we're picking on these guys, but Felix Hernandez, I mean, he does have a wild range of outcomes, I think, in this slate. His numbers against lefties are concerning dating back to last year. 40% hard contact rate, 51% fly ball rate is a little concerning this season. There are some power lefties in that lineup. Obviously, Joey Gallo is going to stand out over 300 ISO against righties dating back to last year, but obviously that strikeout rate is concerning. Chu heated up a little bit in Tampa. 201 ISO dating back to last year. Obviously, Mazzara, Beltre. These are guys that I don't mind a little mini stack to be really, really contrarian tonight because everyone's probably off of Texas by now, obviously.
Yeah, like I don't hate the Joey Gallo and the Chu like lefty calls in this spot against a guy that struggled against lefties. Like they're fine. Like it would be a spot where Joey Gallo should probably hit a home run.
Yeah, it's just they're all cheap, contrarian stack. Like they're not going to probably crack my first 7 stacks, but I think I'm going to be playing multiple lineups here tonight. And so if you're doing the 2, I mean, a Texas stack with like a Scherzer or Kershaw isn't the worst tournament play.
I can get behind it.
So, anyone else here?
Nah.
Houston and Chicago. James Shields or Lucas Giolito. Hell, Mark Burley might even come in and pitch. I don't know who the hell's pitching for Chicago tonight. It's either Shields or Giolito.
It's gonna be one of those two. Like they were supposed to evaluate whether they wanted to push back Shields for this start because he threw like almost 30 pitches in the marathon game against the Athletics a couple days ago. They still have not come out and said what they're going to do. I don't know why they're trying to be coy. It's not like either one of these guys are extremely great pitchers. But I kind of need to know which one is going to be taking the mound before like I go too deep into my interest in having Houston or not having Houston in my lineups. I will say, like, might as well just get Verlander out of the way. He's one of the top arms on the slate. Like this White Sox team does have a lot of young guys that are kind of hitting the ball extremely hard, like Yohan Moncada, who is just mashing recently, and he is virtually matchup proof at this point. But Verlander's still a guy with a lot of strikeout potential. Like he might come in below Thor for me strictly because he hasn't had good success against the White Sox in this stadium that is kind of a hitter's park. But I don't think you can go wrong with Verlander here.
No, I don't think you can either. I think the one thing I was hoping is that he'd be a little bit cheaper. But I mean, strikeout rates there here. I mean, you mentioned Chicago, a lot of young bats, a lot of guys that are free swinging bats. Verlander, 28.3% strikeout rate against the Chicago roster, over his career. Obviously, Jose Abreu's had some success off Verlander. He's another BVP play for trying to get weird. But yeah, I mean, everything else kind of grades out well. Like Verlander's been fine outside of that Baltimore spot where he ran into a little trouble kind of late in the innings, but bounced back against Texas as everyone really has this year, which probably means Felix Hernandez is going to bounce back. But I like Verlander here. He does, he ranks just behind Scherzer and Kershaw for me.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I can get behind him. Like, there's a little bit of risk, but again, like if you're playing in tournaments, he's probably going to be lower owned. Then he will be lower owned than Scherzer and Kershaw for sure.
Yeah. Um, I mean, it's hard to kind of break down Houston bats here. Like, I guess if Shields is in, like, I do have a lot more interest, I think, in the lefties. I think you could kind of see some frustrating stuff if Shields and you stack the top of the lineup, but I mean, they always had the potential to go off.
Yeah, I think if even if it's Giolito, like Giolito, a guy 1.47 homers, two lefties dating back to last season. Shields 2.61. Looking at their WOBA allowed, though, like Shields 386, Giolito 301 allowed lefties. Like so, like if it's James Shields, you're definitely considering the Josh Reddicks, the Marwin Gonzalez the lefties in that lineup. Derek Fisher down at the bottom of that lineup if he gets in there would be a guy to consider. If it's Giolito though, like I don't know, like even though he doesn't have a lot of strikeout stuff, he's also a guy not really allowing a ton of hard contact either side of the plate. Fly ball rate looks solid, 275 WOBA allowed to righties. Again, only like a 301 to lefties. Giolito, if he gets in the lineup or if he's the starting pitcher, even though he doesn't have a lot of strikeout stuff, depending on his price, might be a viable SP2 option in tournaments.
FanDuel, we have to check. Well, FanDuel, you'd obviously be using as big one. He's probably not in the player pool. He didn't pitch longer than 10 days.
Yeah, he's 6,300 on DraftKings. Like, I know it's against the Astros, but, and I know he has not pitched very well this season at all. But, like, the Astros also strike out a lot. So there is that.
Yeah, this team's definitely hasn't been the same offense as last year, and they're going to heat up at some point and get back to norm. But I think if Giolito's on the hill, it's just going to kind of push me off of Houston because I don't think ownership is really going to drastically change. So I think Houston will come in a little bit higher on than maybe what you expect. I learned about that out in Seattle. Was thinking I'd get them at really decent ownership, but that wasn't the case.
Yeah, I mean, they're still like everyone just loves Houston. Like everyone still has this image in their mind that they're the same offense they were last year, and they are still the same offense they were last year. Their players haven't changed. I just think it's one of those things where they're like, well, we don't really have to try that hard this early in the season. It's a long season, so let's just turn it on later, like flip the switch. If we're gonna talk about like NBA, Cavs and Warriors flipping that switch, I think the Astros at some point are just gonna be like, all right, let's turn it on, let's win some games, and eventually they're gonna be the hot offense. But like right now, it feels like they're just like we don't have to try that hard because we can just murder everyone later on in the season.
And when your pitchers are allowing only like 2 earned runs to start, you don't have to put up that much offense.
Yeah, they can just be like, they can just go out there and be like, oh, okay, we gotta get 2 runs here.
Next one here, Miami, Milwaukee, Ulysses Chassin versus Trevor Richards. This is such a meh game, but I think you can find some good stuff in here. Richards, hard contact rate to righties is a little bit concerning here. I kind of don't mind some bats. I think you can make some. I mentioned the hard contact to righties, but I think you can go with some of the lefties. Brewers will be a little bit of an interesting stack in GPPs too, but Yelich I like a lot here.
I think the Brewers, like outside of the Coors slate, might be like the second chalkiest stack of the night, just because they went bananas last night. You do have those numbers for Richards against righties, a 46% hard contact allowed, a 451 WOBA allowed. We're talking like a 15 inning sample size because this guy doesn't have a track record, but like I think you're gonna get like the Canes and the Santanas and the Bronze and some of these guys extremely highly owned. I don't mind them in the spot. Like you can definitely roll them out. If Jesus Aguilar finds himself in the lineup, I would love you using him as like a value option because he's actually pretty solid against righties. Generally, he's a guy you prefer against lefties, but he's not bad against righties either.
He's not. And look at some of the prices. Like Shaw below 4K. I like hitting cleanup. Thames 4.9. I think I'm gonna hop off Thames and go some other directions. I don't know. I just Kane I can understand. I don't know how high on Yelich will be at 4.7. Just because we've mentioned like Nelson Cruz is 4.3. There's been a couple other guys that I feel are underpriced or in a similar price range where I don't know. I don't know how, but people do love playing Milwaukee here, and I guess that's what people will probably continue to do.
Yeah, I think so. And the one guy I will be interested to see what catcher gets in the lineup. If it's Bandy or Nottingham. If Nottingham is in the lineup, I do really like him as a really cheap option. I don't mind Bandy here either.
I don't have any interest in Chassin. Do you?
No.
I do like Justin Bohr at 3K though, and GT Room to 2.6.
Yeah, I saw those prices and I was like, what the hell? Like, they're really, really cheap and in a really, really good spot. Like, I love Bohr here, dude, with 255 ISO against right-handed pitching dating back to last season. Good spot for him. I really like the spot for him. Um, Real Muto, you mentioned, great spot. Lewis Brinson revenge narrative apparently is a thing. So yeah, he's a guy I don't even mind. Like, I know Miguel Rojas put up a dud yesterday, but he's a value Marlins bat that you can consider. Dude generally does not put up zeros.
No, he doesn't. So I mean, Miami's another team that has some value within their lineup, despite being somewhat of an ugly offense.
Yes.
So moving on, Cincinnati, St. Louis, Michael Walker taking on Brandon Finnegan. I don't have any interest in either of these two pitchers. I can understand Walker being used tonight as an SP2. I'm just not going there. I think I've just been burned by Walker so many times.
I think he's going to be a popular SP2 cash option. And I get it. Like, the Reds are putrid. Like, they are so bad they just fired their manager and they're like 3 weeks into the season. That's how bad they are. They're striking out like 25% of the time. Walk is a guy you expect to get run support in the spot, should be able to put up a solid outing. Unfortunately, it is Michael Waka, and we've seen him struggle in perfect matchups before. There is some strikeout upside. There's also some risk with him. I think he's a fine option if you want to roll him out. I think I'm looking other places, though.
Yeah, just 10 walks through a couple starts this year, like hasn't pitched past the fifth. And you mentioned like people are going to use them as SP2. And I think when people do want to use them over 20% or 15-20%, like, oh, I'm done. I don't want it.
Yeah, like every time I see like his name on the slate, like I can't get the Muppets out of my head, the waka waka waka. Like, and it turns me off of him.
Yeah. Just for that reason. Cardinals bats here, though, in a great spot. I talk about in the stacking article, but we can kind of break them down a little bit more here. Really hoping Tommy Pham's back in the lineup.
He should be. They said he could have hit yesterday if they needed him to, so he should be back in the lineup. I do really love him in the spot. I love all the Cardinals bats in the spot. Jose Martinez, guys, he's going to regress. I'm planting my flag right now. Jose Martinez is going to regress.
Hey, don't tell certain people that. But there are some big Jose Martinez fans out there.
I am a huge Jose Martinez fan, but again, he's another guy, 400 BABIP. That is the mark that people use for regression, because apparently BABIP stands for luck in most people's minds. Still 415 ISO dating back to last season against lefties. A lot of power, decent on-base numbers. I'd love him in this spot. Tommy Pham, if he gets in the lineup, great option. If he's not in the lineup, you're probably going to see Harrison Bader take his place. Excellent option. Jed Jerko is back. The Jerk store is open for business.
Yeah, I don't think you can go wrong really like 1 through 8 here.
You really can't. Like, Matt Carpenter's the only guy that I don't have that much interest in.
Yeah, that would be it. But like even the back half guys, like Jerko's 3-1. Paul DeJong strikes out a ton, but has power against lefties. Yadi still, as hot as he's been to start the year, still under 4K. And looking at some of these guys too, Yadier Molina crushes sliders.
You stole what I was gonna say.
Sorry. Go ahead.
There's an 818 ISO against sliders last season.
I think that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I think that's good.
He also crushes two-seam fastballs and 545 ISO. 85% of Finnegan's pitches to righties are either sliders or two-seam fastballs.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, I don't know what happened to Ozuna, like his numbers wise, but he's not this average against lefties. Ozuna can crush lefties. Expected WOBA 373. I don't have his expected slugging on hand, but I know it was a pretty significant difference too. It was weird, like Ozuna just started mashing righties more than lefties last year, but larger sample size, he still crushes lefties.
Everybody in this lineup pretty much crushes lefties.
There you go. Some stacks and cards tonight.
Yes.
Did you have interest in any Cincy bats?
No.
Me either. Chicago, Colorado next year. As we mentioned earlier, I'm not prioritizing this game. Some people will. Some people just live, religiously through cores and feel the complete need to play cores, and you can. These are two above-average pitchers against two offenses that kind of been up and down to start the year. I mean, if you want to make a stack, go for it because it's cores, but I'm not really going here a ton.
I'm not either, and because there's going to be so much ownership on these Coors bats, and because Vegas is super high on both offenses, you could get away with using these pitchers in tournaments. Like John Gray, I know struggled against the Padres at home, but if you look at his numbers dating back to last season, was not terrible at home. Kyle Hendricks, a guy I think you can get away if you're building a ton of lineups using some of these pitchers because they're both really, really cheap on DraftKings.
Yeah, they are. I think I'd be more on Gray, just because I think this guy he throws a little bit harder, has that hard slider, which that stuff works a little bit more in course. Why he has found some success there. Where I think Hendricks could potentially kind of struggle a little bit more. I don't know though. Rocky's lineup might be really bad. Cargo left the game. Parra left the game. Two lefty bats out of the lineup there could be pretty watered down. I know they get Arenado back.
If it's a righty-heavy lineup, I would have more interest in Hendricks because Hendricks is a guy 270 WOBA last year or dating back to last season against righties. His biggest struggles have been against lefties and, a whole 328 WOBA allowed, really struggling there. But 1.64 homers per nine. If you're wanting to get just a sprinkle of ownership or exposure in this game, I think Charlie Blackmon obviously in a great spot. If Cargo or Parra are in the lineup, they're two bats you can consider. Tony Wolters, if he's the catcher that gets in there, a value catcher from this game, it would be the lefties against Hendricks for me if I'm dying to get exposure here.
Yeah, and if those outfielders are out, you'll probably see Ryan McMahon get in the lineup because apparently everyone has to die before he gets into the lineup.
It's true.
So, I don't mind the Colorado lefties there. Cubs bats, if I'm dying to get exposure, it's probably just going to be Brian or Rizzo as a one-off just to get some exposure, but I don't love anyone else here. Hap's striking out 50% of the time this year.
It would be Bryant, Rizzo, or Javi.
Oh, yeah, I like that call. Yeah, that's it here.
Yeah.
San Diego, Arizona. Coach taking on Tyson Ross.
Actually, Cook.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's pronounced Cook.
Well, that's just contrarian to be contrarian. Come on.
Yes.
Sorry, Matt Cook here taking on Tyson Ross. Let's let you talk about Ross here.
First of all, I had to look up how you pronounce Cook's last name because I didn't want to call him Cock the entire podcast and that not be correct. Or if it was Cock, I wanted to make sure it was correct. I didn't want to insult the guy.
Is that the first pronunciation you went to?
Well, that's what it looks like.
I could I guess Coke, Koch, Koch brothers. I don't know. All right, enough.
This podcast took a really poor turn. Tyson Ross, don't kill me here. This is a very interesting spot for Tyson Ross. I think he is a guy you and I were talking beforehand. Last game against the Giants, started to rely on his slider a lot. He generated 10 swing strikes with it, actually looked decent against them. He had a decent game against them. he's throwing his slider like 40% of the time to both sides of the plate. There are not a lot of bats in this Arizona lineup that hit sliders very well. You have Ketel Marte, who has a decent amount of power against it, and you have Chris Owings, um, who has like a 200 ISO against it. But the rest of this team struggles against sliders. Like where he's going to get in trouble against these Diamondbacks is going to be his four seamer, and that's a pitch that Goldie, Peralta, Pollock all hit really well. But if he's going to rely on that slider a lot more, these Diamondbacks have really, really, really struggled against movement pitches and secondary stuff this season. And against righties, they're striking out like 26% of the time. Tyson Ross is 5,900 on DraftKings. You're not using him on FanDuel. Like you're not paying down on FanDuel. Like it's not a move that you're really making. He's 11.9 on Fantasy Draft. I'm sure he's cheap on Yahoo if you play over there. He could put up a good game here.
I don't hate it. I think this Arizona lineup is a little bit overrated, I think, in terms of fantasy production. Like, I know a couple of guys have had some decent starts this season, but Alex Avila looks lost at the plate. Nick Ahmed, obviously better against lefties, like Jared Dyson, Daniel Descalso. Yeah, I don't know here. Like, I'm with you. I think Tyson Ross could have a decent outing. You kind of talked me onto him here. It wasn't really on my radar starting the day, but DK is an SP2. I don't hate that.
Yeah, you mentioned Alex Avila. The dude could strike out in a T-ball game. Like he's batting, he's like 34% strikeout rate dating back to last season. Has power, but like the dude's bad.
Something must be up because that last night or the night before we talked about him and Descalso as being like really solid options, and was watching that game. Avila was just like they were just pumping fastballs right down the middle to Avila, and he was like just a mile away. Like I don't know what's up with him.
Did he do that thing where he like tried to make his knees buckle to manipulate the strike zone whenever they were coming down the pipe?
I don't remember seeing that. But it's always a bad sign.
Yeah, it is.
Any interest in Matt Cook?
No.
I didn't. Did you only look at his name and just not anything else? Like that. His name's Matt Cook. I don't believe him.
I looked at his minor league numbers, and like they are not great. Like this is a guy that has not had solid strikeout stuff in any level of the minors. Like I know he has a 50% strikeout rate this season in 2 innings, but like dating back to 2012, he has 2 seasons across any level of minor league baseball. That's single A to triple A, where he's had a 20% or higher strikeout rate. And there's just no stuff there for him, I don't think.
Oh, I don't mind San Diego. Freddie Galvis is a guy I'll be intrigued with. Eric Hosmer, French Cordero here. I mean, like, I don't mind a couple of these lefty bats.
I like Hosmer in the spot as a guy that you can look at. Again, a contrarian option. No one's going to look at him. Villanueva is interesting. He strikes out a lot, but that could be mitigated by the fact that Cook doesn't strike out a lot of batters. Franchi continues to be a solid option. Asuaje, decent option here too. I like him as like a tournament value stack.
Yeah, definitely don't mind it. Did you like anyone on the Arizona side?
If you wanted to roll out like Ketel Marte, who's hitting the ball extremely well, like leads the majors in contact rate in the zone, and Ross is a guy that is throwing the ball in the zone like 88% of the time or something like that. So 42% of the time. I was looking at the wrong number. So you could roll him out.
Next game here, we got Boston and Oakland. Drew Pomeranz on his way back, making his first start this year, taking on Kendall Graveman. Drew Pomeranz, intriguing option just because Oakland does strike out quite a bit. I can't shake the fact that I can just imagine him like having the trainers come out and he's kind of shaking his forearm like again, and like I for some reason I just picture that happening again tonight.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about him. His player card, Pomeranz will be on a pitch count between 100 and 105 pitches. That's not a pitch count.
Well, I'm sure that'll pop up.
That's a typical game for most pitchers.
Yeah, so copy that and put it in our comment section, so we can see that.
I like him in the spot. Like this A's team strikes out 23% of the time against lefties. They do have a lot of power in that lineup, and there are some guys that do kind of hit his pitches a little bit well. Like he's kind of a knuckle curve guy. That does concern me a little bit, especially when you have like Jed Lowry, who's like the best hitter in baseball right now.
No, he's been awesome. I'm not denying it. He's been great. I'm shutting my mouth about Jed Lowry now.
Yeah, dude's been mashing. Dude has absolutely been mashing. Like he would be a one-off that I would consider against him. 3 homers in his last 4 games. It's crazy.
Yeah, he's been awesome. Like Chris Davis has some solid numbers against curves as well. He does miss a lot, but obviously that's what you're going to get with Chris Davis. I wouldn't mind those guys as like one-offs. I think Pomeranz is an intriguing GPP guy. I kind of see him more as like if you're playing late slates, take some shots on him.
Yeah, I kind of view it the same way. And then we have like Simeon, who has had some decent success against knuckle curves, and Pender is another guy that you could look at. Like I don't mind that stack. Like it's not someone I'd be targeting heavily on like on the main slate, but if you're looking like on like a late slate or something, it wouldn't be a terrible stack.
No, definitely not. Boston side of things, sign me up again. I just don't see like any reason to stop fading these guys. Like especially on a 15-game slate. I know Mookie Betts will gain some ownership, probably Martinez too, but like Benintendi was 7% last night. Hanley was lower owned. Devers was 20% because he was like the only viable third base. But I kind of like Boston here is like a somewhat contrarian stack from what they've been the previous few nights.
You mean Devers wasn't popular because he was bats really well in Angel Stadium?
He does terrific career numbers, and by career numbers, I only mean the last 3 games.
I don't mind the Red Sox stacks. They're one of my top stacks of the day. Unfortunately, I have like 15 stacks that I really, really love, so it's going to be really hard to get these guys. I love Betts in the spot. Obviously, great spot for him. Really expensive on DraftKings. Really hard to get him in, but it's doable. JD Martinez, excellent option. I don't mind taking a shot on like Nunez and Benintendi and some of these other guys that I think will be a little bit lower owned. But all around, like these are excellent bats to consider. Like Nunez is probably one of my favorite options from the Boston side.
Yeah, I like him a lot, and I do like to target the righties more against Graveman than I do lefties. But all the lefties have started to get to Graveman a little bit more, dating back to last year. Just looking at Graveman, I mean, hasn't pitched over the fifth this year. 5, 4, and 5 earned runs through 4 starts this year. I mentioned to you this before the show, and Oakland's bullpen's been really bad. 1.61 home runs per 9, nearly a 40% hard contact rate. So if we're getting, obviously Boston, their road team, if we're getting like 4 or 5 innings against this Oakland pen, God, Boston could really tee off again here.
And it's crazy. Like his pitch counts are ridiculously high. Like Graveman's are like in only 4 innings, he's 93 pitches. Dude's digging himself at a deep grave.
I mean, 7 walks over the last 3 starts, and guy who throws majority of sinkers, and God, Boston just tees off on sinkers.
Yeah.
So I love him a lot here. Like you mentioned, like I don't mind going with like Nunez or Jackie Bradley Jr. Devers, like you can even start it. It's contrarian, kind of fading some of those top guys, but like you said, Mookie 5.7 because he's had 5 homers over the last 3 games.
Yeah, when Mookie starts to heat up, like Mookie gets really hot, so it is kind of tough to fade him. But like you're looking at a guy like Jackie Bradley Jr. against sinkers, 318 ISO.
Yeah.
Last season, like that's a solid number. Brock Holt 250 ISO. We're talking small samples, but I don't mind the bottom half of that order because it's going to be a stack. That part of the stack is going to be extremely low owned.
Yeah, new boy Nunez 362 wob off sinkers.
Yeah.
So yeah, they all just crush them. I'm going back to the well. Let's move on. LA and San Francisco. Andrew Heaney versus Jeff Samardzija. Samardzija working his way back from an injury. He'll pitch tonight. Man, Angels offense, I was a little bit surprised more for their like second outings against like Rodriguez and Porcello.
Yeah, their offense has not been that great recently, at least the past couple of games.
Yeah, and I don't know what to do here with Shark. Like again, I'm not using Shark, but I don't know what to do with these Angels bats.
I don't really either. And like I was sitting here looking, digging into his pitch mix to see like if there's anybody that kind of really profiles extremely well. The problem is that Samardzija throws like 44 different pitches. It's literally like his pitch mix is ridiculous. Like they're just to righties alone, it's like 2017. He threw a four-seam fastball, two-seam fastball, a cut fastball, a slider, a knuckle curve, a split finger fastball, and it's like 15%, 19%, 4, 9, 33% with the two-seam fastball, 18% with the four-seamer. So he throws a lot of pitches and he keeps guys off balance with those pitches, but like I don't know that I really want to use him, but I don't know that I want to stack against him outside of maybe like Albert Pujols, which is kind of crazy. That'd be about it.
Yeah, I'm not like I don't know. Maybe I'll take a one off and like Otani and hope it's an Otani night. But I don't really care for his price all that much. Um, yeah, I'm not super thrilled. I just like too many other offenses over the Angels, so I think they're just going to be the odd man out.
Yeah, I agree there.
So Giants here against Heaney. You mentioned something to me about Heaney that baffling. I think anyone would be baffled to hear.
So in his career, Andrew Heaney has thrown 2,234 pitches. Of those 2,234 pitches, 3 of them have been fastballs. His career started in 2012. He's thrown 3 fastballs since 2012.
And those probably 3 were just sinkers that didn't sink, and so they registered as fastballs.
Probably.
Yeah, that's wild. Like it really is something. He needs a guy like I want to like here in this spot. I do think he's an intriguing GPP option.
I think so too. This is a Giants team that does have some strikeouts in that lineup. Like I know Greinke wasn't able to notch a bunch against them, but we were still talking about a team 25.5% strikeout rate dating back to last season. It's an interesting spot for Heaney. Like there's a couple bats in this lineup that I think could get to him because he does rely heavily on that sinker. Like Andrew McCutchen and Austin Jackson are 2 guys that have just mashed sinkers in a very small sample size. Outside of that, though, I'm not terribly concerned about most of these guys in this lineup.
No, like I don't have really a lot of interest in these guys. Like I think Andrew McCutchen, once again, anytime he's going to face a lefty, I'll have some interest.
Yeah, and I will say this, like, I don't necessarily think the Giants' massive strikeout rate to lefties is going to continue. Like, most of these guys are disciplined at the plate. I think a lot of it is a byproduct of facing Patrick Corbin and Robbie Ray like twice already this season. So
Kershaw, I think they faced Kershaw once. Rich Hill, like they've faced some above average lefties.
Yeah, for sure.
So, anyone else you have interest in here?
Be like I said, McCutchen, Jackson. Jackson's really cheap, excellent option there. Posey. That'd be about it.
Washington, LA, Max Scherzer, Clayton Kershaw, over under of 2 here. I obviously this is the pitcher duel of the slate. I really like both options. I think you and I are in agreement that Kershaw just kind of slightly edges out Scherzer here.
Yeah, for me, it comes down to strikeout upside. And while Scherzer does have a higher strikeout rate dating back to last season, he's at 34.8. Kershaw is 29.9. I think that gets rectified by the fact that the Nationals this season against lefties are striking out 28.4% of the time. The Dodgers against righties are striking out 19.4% of the time. So, like, both of these guys have the potential to put up big games. Both of these guys had the potential to go very deep in this game. I think the deciding factor for me is the strikeout upside from Kershaw, especially if Rendon is not in that lineup. That definitely helps. And the fact that it's pretty much a lock that Scherzer is going to give up a homer to a lefty. And so, like, Kershaw might get 1 run of run support tonight.
Yeah, I think it's going to come down to, I think there's obviously these guys, it's like it's the 1 or 2 mistake pitch, like who's going to make it. And I'm with you. I think Scherzer kind of makes that mistake pitch because we've seen that a handful of times, dating back to last year or 2, where lefties have kind of taken advantage of that, hanging pitch where you just can't miss.
What if it's Kershaw that homers off Scherzer?
That would be something.
That would be amazing.
What if Wilmer Difo homers off Kershaw?
It might happen.
I don't know. I feel like Kershaw's kind of been more vulnerable to lefty home runs than he has to righties.
He has. It actually, the numbers do show like 223 home run per nine to lefties compared to Scherzer's 138. But yeah, it still feels like Scherzer's the guy that's going to give up the home run.
Yeah, I think so. But obviously, the guys both terrific options in all formats. Strikeout upside there for both of them. I'm not taking bats here. The slate's big enough where I don't feel like you have to be super contrarian, and it's not like these guys are priced down anymore because they're facing aces.
No, they're really not, and there's no one that like stands out as like an amazing option here. Like, yeah, I just don't really see a reason to try to get contrarian here and do anything like that. Like Bryce Harper has like one home run off of Kershaw, and let's see, 18 at bats. He has a 50.056 average, one home run. Uh, yeah.
Yeah, so 15 game slates. I'm pretty sure that was longer than like a movie you go see in the theater.
Like an hour and a little over an hour.
All right, not too bad. Home run calls, 15 games tonight. We got a lot of options.
Yadier Molina and Miguel Andujar.
Man, two contrarian options here. I like it. Man, let's go. I'm gonna go Joey Gallo. And I am gonna go. I'm gonna go Jackie Bradley Jr.
I dig it.
That's it for us. We're off the weekend. We'll be back on Monday, and good luck tonight.
Good luck.